John Harbaugh opened up about the MVP race and defended Lamar Jackson in the process, but also had an interesting take on the whole ordeal. We talk about that. Diontae Johnson finally breaking his silence about what happened in Baltimore and so much more coming up next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much, as always, for being with us and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every single day as well. We're free and available all podcasting platforms. So in video form on YouTube, you can like and subscribe to the channel. Also in audio form, you can follow along and subscribe over there as well for 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage. Whichever way you decide to watch or listen, news analysis updates. We go live after every single Ravens game, every piece of big news. We have you covered here on the show. Here with me today, as always, Taco Tuesday, former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver, Super Bowl champion, Qadry Ismail. And Q, was a very Merry Christmas for the Baltimore Ravens, beating down on the Houston Texans and taking their place back at the top of the AFC North. Still have some work to do to make sure they secure that division in Week 18 against the Cleveland Browns. But there's a lot of conversation about this Ravens team, Q, because it feels like they might be peaking at the right time.
I tell you what, you cannot have scripted a better 3 games in 11 days than what the Baltimore Ravens did and accomplished. The way they took on the Giants, the way they then got their minds right, turned the page real quickly to Pittsburgh, the Ardarius Washington plays that were made in that Pittsburgh game that really turned the tide. Marlon, Humphrey's $11,000 lighter, but hey, he contributed as well in a mega way. And then, of course, what they did against the Houston Texans, just setting up everything for what is in front of them, which is an opportunity to win the AFC North, get the division title, get a home playoff game, and continue their way and their journey into this postseason play.
Yeah, and again, new season starts up after the regular season ends. And for Baltimore, I think they're going to have a pretty tough path. But you know what, Q, in order to be the best, you have to beat the best. And I feel like Baltimore will definitely embrace the challenge. We'll get to that a little bit more in the final part of the show. But the MVP conversation, Q, it's been polarizing. It's been interesting. It's been toxic. I'll tell you that much. It's definitely been toxic. But you have 2 great players in Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen who are doing their thing. They're having incredible seasons. And a lot of the conversation around both of those players is who deserves it more, who is more valuable, who do they have around them, what are the stats like? Well, John Harbaugh, because we heard Sean McDermott defend his guy and Josh Allen, as you would expect him to. You hear guys like Spencer Brown, Bill's offensive lineman, defend Josh. And then you have Charlie Kohler, your guy. That's your guy, taking to Twitter and defending Lamar, kind of roasting Bills fans a little bit. I talked about that extensively yesterday because Charlie just coming from the top rope. I didn't see it coming. But John Harbaugh was asked about the MVP conversation, was asked about Lamar, his development, and kind of who he has become as a player and how amazing he has been. And he was asked that is Lamar the MVP? Is he your MVP? And John Harbaugh said, he's my MVP. He'll always be my MVP. I promise you that. He's our MVP. He's our guy. But I haven't heard anyone talk about it. I haven't heard Lamar talk about it. We're just trying to win the next game. So look, John Harbaugh, yes, he's sticking up for his guy. He's riding with his guy. I don't think anybody expected anything less than that from John Harbaugh. But it kind of is the narrative that we've been hearing, honestly, for both guys. Josh, obviously, after the game against the Jets, said he didn't really care about the whole conversation. Lamar has said that he has bigger goals, but the award is very humbling and it's a big deal, but he views it more as a team award. Q, the goal for the Ravens is to win a Super Bowl, right? Lamar would trade all 2 or potentially, hypothetically, 3 of his MVPs for a Super Bowl championship. I don't think there's any doubt in anybody's mind about that. But when it comes to Lamar and how good he's been and how incredible of a player he's become, I think that everybody sees it, but he does have 2 MVPs. And now these narratives are coming out to almost discredit what Lamar has done. if you feel like Lamar's the favorite, that's fine. If you feel like Josh is the favorite, all right, that's fine. Both guys have had great years. But give the award to the guy that deserves it. But at the end of the day, Super Bowl is more important than the MVP.
Well, yes. I mean, that is the ultimate goal. But again, what you've done in the regular season sets you up for what the postseason looks like. And then when you look at the regular season, yeah, you got pros. You got guys that are at the top of their game. But you want to see who's the top of the top, the best of the best, the elite of the elite, the less than the less than the less than the 1%. And that's where the MVP comes in. We've had this discussion. Gosh, when I was in the league, it was no big deal to talk about Peyton Manning, Brett Favre with multiple MVPs. Heck, Aaron Rodgers always in the mix and in the conversation. Goodness, I remember the one year it was it Barry Sanders? Was it Brett Favre? I think they might have had a co-MVP. I'm not sure. Regardless, I think what we're seeing here, current day, is really kind of an interesting take on what, in my mind, is the clear-cut guy being tainted because he's too good. And the other guy should win it because he's not as good, but he's good, but we're going to give him some sympathy because the other guy won it too many times, and that's like a participation trophy. And I thought, when you look at this game, it's all about what your meritocracy is done, and that's based upon your merit, based upon your efforts and your talents and abilities and how you lead and win and put up numbers. Lamar Jackson, clearing away, wants to win the Super Bowl, but also clearing away, he's the regular season MVP.
Yeah, and again, I feel like the mindset that John Harbaugh has, that Lamar Jackson has on the whole thing, that is the correct mindset to have, where, yes, Lamar, in my eyes, Q, in your eyes, and the Ravens' eyes, that's the MVP. It's Lamar Jackson. But you can't get caught up in the conversation because there are bigger goals, but I think that you can separate the conversations. Like you said, I thought that was a great point because the regular season, it's a lot of it, Q, is because the award isn't handed out until a lot of the playoff stuff has already happened. And so you kind of hear, like, for example, if let's say Josh wins it and Josh gets eliminated in the second round, you're going to, oh, well, Josh didn't deserve the MVP. Or if Lamar wins it and then Lamar gets eliminated in the AFC Championship, right? Let's just say that happens. Knock on wood. Hopefully they go further than that. But if it happens, we heard it last year where it's like, oh, Lamar had a terrible game against the Chiefs. He's not the MVP. MVP is a regular season award. That is what it is. But I'm curious, Q, would you be open to the idea of a co-MVP for Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson? I think Lamar deserves it. I think Josh obviously has done enough to deserve it as well. It's just two guys having great seasons side by side. Co-MVPs, they have happened before. Would you be open to it in this case?
Because Josh went head-to-head with Lamar, and I don't care about when, but they did go head-to-head, I tend to say no because he didn't have as good of a game as Lamar did. And so that would put it over the top to say, no, I don't want a co-MVP. James Cook, he has had a phenomenal year. So you got to just like speed bump over the whole, Derrick Henry argument. I think they both have played tremendous. But Lamar historically broke a record that is just outstanding, out of this world. Maybe if it was Joe Burrow and Josh Allen and Lamar wasn't in the conversation, sure, co-MVP it. But when you talk about splash plays, big plays, meaningful plays, all the things, the consistency of it all, think Lamar Jackson by himself.
Yeah, and I do think that I don't really know the whole co-MVP conversation. It is interesting because, we have seen that happen in the history of the league, but there are arguments for and against both players, but it feels like the arguments that are being used against Lamar, it is him being punished for having Derrick Henry on his team. Whereas we've seen Lamar without Derrick Henry before. He won 2 MVPs without Derrick Henry. Henry's an incredible player. He has certainly helped Lamar. but Lamar also has helped Derrick Henry. There were conversations earlier in the season. Ryan Clark, for example, after the Ravens lost to the Raiders in week 2, said he wasn't scared of Zay Flowers or Rashod Bateman. And now Lamar Jackson is being punished because Zay Flowers and Rashod Bateman are such good separators that, Lamar has it easy, right? But then when people are bringing Joe Burrow into the conversation, hey, I think, doesn't Joe Burrow have 2 all-pro stud Pro Bowl wide receivers? Is he getting punished for that in those takes? Like, it's that kind of thing. And I think the big conversation is that you're right. If you're awarding a participation trophy MVP, that's not good for anybody. Like, if I'm Josh Allen, I'm mad if that's why I win the MVP. If I'm Josh, I want to win it because I deserve it. Not because you feel bad for me because Lamar has 2 and I have none. If Josh deserves it at the end of the season, again, full 18 weeks, 17 games, okay. If Lamar deserves it, same thing. But I know people are talking about the win-loss record, 2 more losses for Baltimore. I know people are talking about the seeding, 2 versus 3. I just don't think Q, in my mind, for example, Joe Burrow and his record in that whole conversation, that's real because they might not even make the playoffs. And if they do, it's going to be the 7 seed. I don't see how you can give the MVP to a 7 seed. If the Ravens were the 5 seed, it'd be kind of the same thing where it's like, can you give the MVP to a guy who is in the wild card race as opposed to somebody who's in the 2 seed? But we're talking about a 1 seed difference and a 2-loss difference. That to me is not necessarily that big of a difference to discount the statistical advantage and some of the other things we've seen from Lamar in terms of the eye test, him taking away defenders on runs, on clear handoffs to Derrick Henry. The defense is so worried about Lamar that they have to put a guy out there or put multiple guys, and all of a sudden on defense, you're playing 8 on 11 or 10 on 11. And that's a big part of it. Not that Josh doesn't have that impact, but you clearly see that with Lamar, but it's not being talked about a ton.
It's interesting, all those points. I want to go back to the receiver one. Well, when you look at Rashod Bateman and you look at what he's been able to do, and, of course, obviously Zay Flowers, those plays that they've made, I mean, sometimes those are extended plays. You're only going to get those extended plays because you got a dynamic playmaker in Lamar Jackson. And, oh, by the way, Lamar swept Joe Burrow. So what are we saying here? Again, even head-to-head there, whooped him. You look at Josh Allen, whooped him. You look at his players around him, they're benefiting because Lamar does things unique and really outside the box that other quarterbacks can't. They're like getting rid of the football. They're not saying that, Bate and Zay can't separate. They do, and it's clear, but it also helps when you got Lamar. When you look at Derrick Henry, numbers don't lie. Derrick Henry's numbers are better because of Lamar and not the other way around. Other running backs that have played in the Lamar Jackson era have benefited because of Lamar Jackson. That's MVP conversation. That's not he had multiple MVPs and we just want to give it to somebody else. I mean, that to me that doesn't sound on the level. Something's not right when you're talking about that and what that actually means.
Yeah, I've never been a fan of the whole voter fatigue conversation. I feel like if a guy deserves it 5 years in a row, give it to the guy 5 years in a row, right? That's just my thing. Don't give it to somebody just because you're tired of voting for one person. Josh has had a very good year. He and Lamar have had incredible seasons. Both are incredible quarterbacks. But I just feel like, and honestly, I think Nina Kimes Q put this best, where Joe Burrow has the best wide receivers. Josh Allen has the best offensive line. Derrick Henry and Mark Andrews, as they likely, Lamar has the best running back and the best tight ends. Everybody has their specific advantages and disadvantages. It's not like Lamar has 8 all-pro receivers on his roster, 3 all-pro running backs, Hall of Fame offensive linemen at all 5 positions, but that's how it feels like it's being talked about. Meanwhile, Q, if I'm James Cook, I'm just like, hey, I'm a pretty good player. I'm a good player. And everybody's like, no, Josh has no help. James Cook is awful. And Khalil Shakir can't separate. When in reality, yes, the Bills lost guys. They lost Stephon Diggs. They lost a lot of defensive talent. I'm not trying to dispute that fact. The Bills weren't expected to have the year that they were. But we're even seeing the award definition being bent in terms of, MVP means most valuable. Who makes the most impact? And I'm just like, well, does Lamar not make a huge, massive impact. So it's just that entire conversation. We heard Dan Orlovsky walk back some of his MVP, I guess, victory laps on Josh Allen, although he's made it very clear who he's voting for. So just a wild situation all around. But you want to know what else is wild? Deontae Johnson, a name that you might not have heard in a couple of weeks, but he's back in the headlines because he finally broke his silence on his Ravens tenure and what happened. Plus, on his new team, he had a very interesting comment about how he's going to view his new role and new opportunity with Houston. So be sure to stay tuned. We have a lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Rocket Money. The Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice. That's definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions I didn't even know and realize I was still paying for them. Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is a subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. We're back. Our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher and Qadry Ismail still talking with you here on this Taco Tuesday edition of the show. Appreciate everybody for being here again, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every day. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, video form and audio form as well. Q, I don't know if I've seen as many headlines for one player that in as short of amount of time I've seen with Deontae Johnson, even for a guy who's not on the team. I think a lot of people finally glad we escaped the whole conversation. I believe this will probably be the last Deontae Johnson conversation we have unless he says something else about the Ravens. But Deontae practiced for the first time in a Texans uniform. No, we're not going to be talking Deontae for the full segment. We're going to talk about the Ravens wide receivers as well, so don't worry. But we have to talk about this because it's a big headline. Deontae was asked about his time with the Ravens and had some pretty interesting comments about it. Kind of just said that he wanted to leave it in the past, which I get, it was a weird situation, but he said, quote, "I'm going to leave that in the past. Fresh start here. I had a good time there. I got some good teammates over there. Those relationships are still going to be there. I'm trying to win games and go far in the playoffs." Now, Q, we also saw after the Ravens and Texans game where Deontae Johnson didn't play, but he was on the sideline. It was Lamar Jackson, Isaiah Likely, Derrick Henry. There might have been one or two more players in there. I can't recall exactly, but Deontae was laughing with those guys, jumping around with those guys, having fun with those guys. So not necessarily the interaction you would have expected if, he was such a bad locker room presence and, wasn't a team player, this, that, and the other. It just adds all this weird uncertainty to how the situation actually played out. Because look, if he was a toxic distraction, his teammates wouldn't be reacting to him that way. But clearly he had an impact on those guys.
Yeah.
He wants a fresh start, which I get, but I think it's just the mystery of how it all unfolded that still kind of gets me here.
I think that is the big thing that everyone will kind of talk about and try to figure out. And maybe in the offseason when everything's in a rearview mirror, this will somehow someone will be off the record enough to be like, well, what happened was he was sitting there and they said, well, number 18 going to game. But then he decided he's not going to even be on the sideline. He's going to be in the locker room because he's pissed that he ain't playing. And that's when John and maybe the receiver coach or whoever's responsible for getting guys in and out of the game, maybe that's when they were like, oh, whoa, what's going on? And then it kind of snowballed. That's what I'm assuming is probably going to eventually come out, and they'll probably say, what's what. But until then, we know that the videos show clearly like he was really liked. His boys were like, yo, man, we good. Like, you don't say you had some close-knit dudes that are always going to have relationship with if it was some superficial, just, oh, yeah, what's up, bro? How you doing? Cool. All right, man. Nah, them dudes was like genuinely interacting with him for a good quality period of time. And so that to me says an awful, awful lot. I don't know why, but I just know that they felt a good connection with Diontae Johnson, and he did with them as well, but didn't work out. So I don't know what the coaches / front office felt as far as him and him being in the building. And now clearly he gets an opportunity. We'll see what that even looks like when it comes to Houston. Who knows? We might even be seeing them again, potentially. Who knows?
Yeah, and hopefully that's not the case because that would mean the Ravens would lose the division. But in terms of opponent, I feel pretty good about a Houston-Baltimore rematch in the postseason, even if Baltimore had to go back there. But Diontae was asked about joining the Texans, what he's seen and what he's learned over a short time with the team. And he said, everybody's about the team. I'm about the team too. So I'm doing whatever the coaches ask me to do. And everybody's like, hold on a second. You're about the team. Then why didn't you go in the game and play against the Eagles when you were asked, what's all this about being about the team too? So everybody was up in arms about that on social media when Diontae first said that. But that's kind of the thing here, where we did hear something very similar when Diontae first came to the team. And he said, he's getting acclimated, learning the playbook, doing whatever he's asked to do. We heard that answer, and obviously it went the way that it did. And then I think I'm about the team kind of just poured salt in the wound for a lot of people, who are Ravens fans. So I don't know what that opportunity is going to bring for Deontae Johnson, like you said, but it's kind of a situation where I'd be curious if, almost as you alluded to, maybe someone will say something in the offseason and then we'll get a clearer picture of what actually happened there. But now Baltimore Q moves into the postseason, at least next week after this game is over, against Cleveland, with Zay Flowers, Rashod Bateman, obviously Tylan Wallace and Nelson Aguilar, Tez Walker. That's a receiver room. We have talked about it all year. We have talked about how Zay and Rashod have really taken their games to the next level. Tylan Wallace, Aguilar, Tez Walker have all had their moments. They're going to be going up against some talented defenses in the playoffs. This is not like you're going to be able to play the Giants every single week and have those games. But we know that these guys can separate. We know that these guys can get open for Lamar Jackson. And it feels like, again, the offense is hitting their stride. And once they get that momentum play, the entire team just takes it up 5-6 notches and just becomes almost unstoppable. So are you still confident in this wide receiver room in the postseason? Or do you think that maybe, again, Zay's a young guy. This is only his second season. And obviously he had the tough game against Kansas City the first time around. I'm sure he's looking forward to hopefully rewriting that chapter and adding a different chapter into that storybook that hasn't been so great in the playoffs for him so far. Rashod hasn't had a ton of playoff experience, kind of being in and out and all this stuff. Do you worry about the youth, or do you think these guys are ready for the big moments here?
No, I think they're ready for the big moments. I don't see this as like something too big for them. I don't see them being, oh my gosh, we don't have this many plays. Like, you've had tons of practice, gone against your own defensive backs regularly in practices. I know that bigger picture is, sure, the stakes are higher. Sure, there's going to be that pressure to, how do you organize your thoughts so you're not choking under pressure? How do you feel as far as, man, if I can, have an 18-yard comeback, making sure I'm disciplined in it. What if I'm just a guy that's a clear-out guy? But then, Lamar Jackson, you could be a clear-out guy, and also you're the main guy because the other guys didn't realize that, you're a clear-out guy, and they're like, they took you for granted, but they didn't know that I was seeing you go down the field, now I'm throwing it to you. Those are moments no one really knows. You could be a veteran or you could be a young player. Sure, there's more of a chance for a veteran to have those seasoned moments and they feel good about it compared to a young guy. But I think even in that young guy with the Ravens, I think they've shown that they in fact can step up and play, even though it won't be the Giants when it comes to, the quality of play. But you're a professional athlete. You got to be like a pro, making sure that you're ready to go at all times.
Yeah, and I think that, again, these guys are ready for that moment and that opportunity. And I think that they all still have a sour taste in their mouth from how that went last season and how they felt probably like they were ready and then they weren't and they dropped that game. Now they have an opportunity. It's going to be a tough playoff path, I think, regardless of who they play. But I think that's good for this team because I think they're in a better position this year than they were last year in terms of the adversity that they have faced as a whole over the course of this season compared to last year. And coming up in the final part of the show, there are some ideal playoff paths for the Ravens, but they involve a couple of interesting quirks in how seeding could happen. And it feels like the Ravens are going to have to go through some AFC giants. But guess what? They're an AFC giant themselves. So coming up, we'll talk about that more on Locked On Ravens. We're back, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher and Qadry Ismail still with you here, talking Ravens football, MVP, Diontae Johnson. But now we are moving past that. Let's get into the actual playoff picture because that's what matters here, right, Q? It's about performing in the playoffs when it matters. Regular season is great. Like you said, you're able to identify your strengths and work on your weaknesses. But once the playoffs start, there's no going back. There's no, we have next week if you have a bad game. That's it for you. So The Ravens have opportunities. But I think it's interesting, and I actually want to dive into this a little bit with you a bit next week once the playoffs actually start. But it is kind of a whole different mindset you have to shift into gear with, regardless of if you have momentum or not. I mean, it really is go time once January hits and that postseason begins.
Yeah, no. I think this is everything. This is what you work for. This is why the OTA, mini camp, training camp, first part of the season, all of it. It all sets up for now. That January push so you can get an opportunity to represent Baltimore Ravens down in New Orleans. And that's just the bottom line. Like you put yourself in these positions, put the stress on yourself, you put yourself in that position, you put the stress on yourself recovery-wise so you can be ready for this position. This position is postseason play. Even though you're playing against your division opponent in the Cleveland Browns, who aren't good and not going to the playoffs, have a backup of a backup of a backup quarterback, they're doing evaluation, all that. It doesn't matter. Who cares? This is necessary. This is what's important. What's important is the fact that you're preparing yourself like this game coming up is a playoff game, and then get right on into it with that mentality moving forward. So I think for this Ravens ball club, regular season is good. It's awesome. It's great. All the pundits can talk and say what they want to say, but now is the real deal and how you're going to perform. That sustains your legacy, both as far as your checkbook is concerned and your leverage, as far as quarterbacking, as far as defending, as far as receiver play, as far as tackling, interceptions, and as far as blocking. All of it. You get into that postseason, you play well, they pay you well.
Yeah, and now, Q, there are a couple different scenarios, especially for the wild card round, that can come to fruition for the Ravens this upcoming weekend. Obviously, if the Ravens beat the Browns, they will win the North, be the 3 seed. Then you have a couple of different scenarios that comes into play about who will actually be traveling to Baltimore to play the team, whether that is the Chargers or the Steelers. There are 3 scenarios where the Chargers will be the team, and there is 1 scenario where it would be the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, you and I have talked about how division games can get crazy. Seeing a team 3 times gets a little dicey as well because you know them, they know you, and that's just kind of how it goes. But the Ravens have struggled with some physical defensive lines at times this season. The Steelers certainly have that. The Chargers, I don't think so much. The Chargers are playing great football right now. The Steelers seem like they're falling apart. Let's take the Texans out of it. Let's just say the Ravens of the North. If you had your pick of which team you feel like Baltimore matches up better against, which team you feel like you would rather have the Ravens play in the wild card round, are you picking the Chargers or are you picking the Steelers?
I would love to see the Chargers again. I think the Steelers, when it comes to just your opponent knowing you and you knowing them, that gets frustrating. And I've been in that scenario before when I was with the Minnesota Vikings playing against the Chicago Bears. That's a tough one. That's as tough as it gets. That third time around is like, okay, are y'all ready? And sometimes you're not. I would say give me the Chargers. I don't care if it's the brothers and all that. I don't care who, what, where with J.K. Dobbins. And now I see he's back, and that's great. I don't care any of that. Let's go ahead and let's play them again. And I think we'd have a better just statistical chance. Now, the purists and all that, yes, play your division guy, for the rubber match. This is going to make it, and all that. Yeah, that's cool. But, man, I'd rather be the Chargers.
Yeah, I think out of matchups, I just think it's so dicey. And the Ravens have been in that situation too. Playing the Steelers 3 times in a season, it just gets so interesting because you do know that team so well. You play them multiple times a season, and I think that can contribute to just how wild those games can actually get. Plus, I think on the defensive side of the ball for the Chargers, I just don't think they have enough to stop this offense, kind of like what we saw the first time around. Justin Herbert's a great quarterback, but Ladd McConkey is kind of the only weapon that he has in that passing game. Quentin Johnston's had a great year considering what happened to him last season, but
up and down in my humble opinion, but yes,
it has been definitely. I feel like with the way that Russ has kind of spiraled over these last couple of weeks and the Pittsburgh offense, George Pickens just seems to be drama all over the field at this point and off of it. I feel I'd be confident in Baltimore beating either of those teams. But Q, if that's the case and they're the 3 seed, then that would leave them on a collision course with the Buffalo Bills, assuming they win their 2-7 matchup. As the 2-3, they'd be traveling to Buffalo to play the Bills. And then if they beat the Bills, assuming Kansas City takes care of their business, it'd be the AFC Championship rematch in Arrowhead between the Chiefs and the Ravens. There's a possibility you play the Steelers, a tough division rival in the first round. You play the Bills, who obviously you beat the first time around, but that's still a good football team over there. And Josh Allen and Lamar, again, 2 best seasons from quarterbacks, ex-playoff teams. I'm not putting Joe Burrow in that conversation right now. And then the Chiefs game, which I think is everybody's ideal, let's circle this, let's get the revenge, let's win. That's a tough stretch. But again, as I said at the beginning of the show, if you want to be the best, you have to beat the best. And I think the Ravens are embracing any challenge that they're going to get coming this postseason.
Yeah, I just love it. I love it. I love this conversation. I love the fact that, you're looking at all the teams that you played during the regular season, and pretty much you, outside of Kansas City, beat them all. And so it doesn't matter. This team is seasoned. I think the term locked in that we used last year, they weren't locked in, and unfortunately it was their undoing. I think this is a different ball club this year. I think whomever they play, wherever they play, is going to be okay. And they're going to be in a position where it looks like it will be a collision course with the Kansas City Chiefs.
And if that's the case, we all know the stakes in that game. We all know how crazy that week would be leading up to it because, again, the team that's standing in between you and your goals, you and what you've been working for all season, is the team that you just cannot seem to beat. But they would have an opportunity to change that narrative. But first, they have to get there. And obviously that starts with winning the division week 18 against the Cleveland Browns. But Q, I always appreciate you. I always appreciate our conversations. Thank you again for joining me. Please tell people where they can find you, what you're working on, because I know you have a lot going on right now.
Yeah, it's missiletraining.com. Missiletraining.com is where you can interact with me. It is not about the exclusivity of athletes. It is about the holistic understanding of athletic movement as well as human movement. And if you are as young as 6 all the way up to 85, it doesn't matter. Presenting myself to you as saying, listen, we have an opportunity to get you better, to allow your body to move the way it is designed to move. So go to missiletraining.com. That's missiletraining.com to interact with me. Shoot me an email. Love to holler back at you and get a good understanding of what your goals and your dreams are about and how I can walk beside you to help you accomplish them, to empower you for it. At the same time, you can also see me on WJZ. We are on Purple Pregame. You'll also see me on Purple Playbook as well from time to time. So check me out on all the Purple shows. And then, of course, right here on Locked On Ravens, it is all about Kevin Oestreicher and I. We break it down weekly, giving you all the insights there is and opinions when it comes to everything Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, Q is a busy man, but he knows his stuff, and he will get you right. So be sure to support Missile Trading, missiletrading.com. Links to everything in the description down below. And be sure you catch him here on Locked On Ravens and, of course, all the other great things that Q does. Q, appreciate you as always, and thank you to everybody who tuned in to the show today. On the way out, hit that like and subscribe button. Follow along in audio form. Tell a friend, tell a family member. I know we're in the social media age, but word of mouth still very, very important. So appreciate all the support. Again, coming up tomorrow, I'll be back here on Locked On Ravens, talking more Ravens football. So stay tuned, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.